All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready to jump back into modern Indian history?
Yeah.
This one's especially for our UPSC aspirants out there. Getting ready for GS1 modern history, and really for anyone who finds this era fascinating.
Absolutely.
Last time we kind of set the stage.
Yeah, we did.
And today we're going to be focusing on the Vokkaligara Sangha and a bunch of other really, really important reform movements that kind of shook things up.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about social justice, equality, all that really captivating stuff, especially for those of you in school or college digging into this period right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Vokkaligara Sangha,
Yeah.
what's really intriguing about them is their journey. They went from like these agricultural roots to becoming like these powerful advocates for their community.
Wow.
Talking about fighting discrimination, pushing for political representation,
Huge.
all that good stuff. Our main source today is this document called Vokkaligara Sangha, Equality, Empowerment, and Social Transformation in Karnataka.
Okay.
So get ready to uncover some surprising facts.
All right, let's dive right in. So the term Vokkaliga itself is rooted in agriculture. It actually comes from Vokku, which means to thresh grain.
That's right.
So it kind of instantly tells you about their connection to the land.
Exactly. But the Vokkaliga community, it wasn't like a single thing. It was made up of all these diverse subsects, like the Gangadakaras, Namadhari, Morasu,
Oh, wow.
and more, each with their own distinct customs and history.
I didn't know that. The document mentioned they weren't always farmers.
Right.
They actually ruled over various principalities in what we now know as Karnataka.
That's right. But they faced, some pretty powerful adversaries, like the Adil Shahi dynasty and Hyder Ali.
Oh, wow.
So, losing power forced them to shift their focus primarily to agriculture.
Okay.
But their ambition and their sense of community never faded.
And that leads us to the birth of the Vokaliga Sangha in 1905 in Mysore.
Yeah.
Seems like this was their way of tackling all those social and political challenges they faced.
Precisely. They were dealing with, social disadvantages, educational disadvantages, even discrimination from those in higher castes.
Yeah.
The Sangha became their platform to really demand change.
Things get really interesting with the justice movement that they spearheaded in the late 1910s.
Yeah, think of it as this, like movement for non-Brahmins demanding better employment opportunities and also a voice in the legislative bodies.
Okay.
They were pushing for greater equality and challenging that existing power structure.
They even launched their own newspaper, Justice, to kind of amplify their message.
Right.
This eventually paved the way for the formation of the Justice Party.
That newspaper was vital. It helped spread their message far and wide, rallying people to their cause. Media can be such a powerful tool for social change, and the Vokaliga Sangha, they knew how to wield it.
Yeah.
And the Justice Party, born from this movement, went on to have a significant impact on the politics of the Madras presidency.
But the Sangha's ambitions went beyond politics. They were really invested in education and empowering their community.
Absolutely. In 1906, they officially established the Vokkaligara Sangha in Bangalore, and they had some serious backing. Tibiana was the first president, and even figures like the Maharaja of Mysore and Dewan VP Madhava Rao supported them.
Wow, high places.
So you can see they had some serious clout.
They weren't just talking about education, they were making it happen. They set up hospitals, educational institutions.
Right.
It's really impressive.
They understood that education was the key to kind of lifting their community out of disadvantage. And they also used newspapers and literary works to spread knowledge, with figures like B. Putaya, their general secretary, playing a vital role as an editor. So it was this multifaceted approach to driving social change.
So we have the Vokaliga Sangha advocating for social justice, promoting education. But there's even more to this story, right?
Yeah.
They were also connected to other really important movements of the time.
You're right. Let's turn our attention to the self-respect movement, which emerged in Tamil Nadu in 1925. Also known as the Dravidian movement, it pushed for equal rights for marginalized castes with a special focus on women's rights.
Who are some of the leading figures behind this movement?
Primarily S. Ramanathan and E.V. Ramaswamy, later known as Periyar. They wanted to instill a sense of self-respect among lower castes, challenging the deeply ingrained caste-based discrimination and aiming to dismantle the existing Hindu social structure.
But it was about more than just legal rights. It was about changing mindsets and deeply rooted social norms.
Exactly. The self-respect movement sought to empower people from lower castes to claim their dignity and demand equal treatment.
It's remarkable how these different threads of social reform were intertwined. Our source highlights figures like Ramanathan, Periyar, Anaiminambal, and Viramal. It seems like there was a whole network of individuals working toward a more just and equitable society.
And each played a unique role.
Yeah.
But E.V. Ramaswamy, or Periyar, he stands out.
Yeah.
Our source even refers to him as the father of modern Tamil Nadu, which says a lot about his impact.
Wow. Now that's a title that demands a deeper look. What makes Periyar such a significant figure? Let's explore his life and contributions in more detail.
Okay, well, even his nickname, Periyar, meaning elder or great one in Tamil, shows the respect he commanded. He was also often called Thantai Periyar, meaning Father Periyar. These titles speak volumes about his influence.
He sounds like a true revolutionary. What were his core beliefs?
Periyar was a fierce advocate for social justice and equality. He strongly opposed Brahminical dominance, believing it perpetuated caste-based discrimination and held back lower castes.
So his vision wasn't limited to the Vokkaliga community. It encompassed all those marginalized and oppressed by the caste system.
Precisely. And his advocacy extended beyond caste. He was a champion for women's rights, recognizing the deep gender inequalities prevalent in society. He believed in the power of education to liberate individuals and uplift entire communities.
That aligns with the Vokkaligara Sangha's focus on education as well. It seems like there was a shared understanding of its transformative potential.
Definitely. However, Periyar's journey wasn't a straight line. He joined the Indian National Congress in 1919, but resigned just 6 years later.
Why the disillusionment with the Congress?
He felt that despite its claims of representing all Indians, the Congress primarily served the elite and wasn't truly committed to addressing the concerns of the marginalized.
So he decided to forge his own path, one that led him to become a key figure in the self-respect movement. What were some of the pivotal moments that shaped his ideology and propelled him to the forefront of social reform?
Well, in 1924, he participated in a nonviolent satyagraha in Vaikom, Kerala. This protest was against denying lower castes access to roads surrounding a temple.
So he was willing to put himself on the line to directly challenge discriminatory practices.
His commitment to social justice was unwavering, and this commitment was further strengthened by his travels abroad. Between 1929 and 1932, he traveled to places like British Malaya, Europe, and even Russia. These experiences exposed him to different ideologies and social movements, broadening his perspective and influencing his thinking.
It seems like those travels were a turning point for him.
They definitely played a role in shaping his worldview and strengthening his resolve to fight for social change.
That fight led him to take the helm of the Justice Party in 1939, eventually renaming it the Dravidar Kazhagam in 1944.
His leadership marked a significant shift for the party, pushing it toward a more radical and assertive stance on social justice and Dravidian identity.
But there was a split within the Dravidar Kazhagam, wasn't there?
Yes, in 1949, a faction led by C.N. Annadurai broke away and formed the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, or DMK. This split, while highlighting internal differences within the movement, also demonstrated the growing momentum of the ideas that Periyar had championed.
So we've journeyed from the Vokaliga Sangha's emergence in Karnataka to the rise of the self-respect movement in Tamil Nadu, with Periyar as its iconic leader. This period was clearly a hotbed of social and political activism, with communities and individuals rising up to demand their rights and challenge the status quo.
And while these movements were mainly focused on South India, their impact resonated throughout the country, influencing discussions on social justice and shaping the political landscape for years to come.
Absolutely. But amidst all this talk of Vokkaligas and Dravidian movements, there's another reform movement mentioned in our source that might seem a little out of place. The Parsi reform movement. What's the connection here?
That's a great observation. It highlights how interconnected various reform movements were during this era. While the Parsi community was distinct from the Vokkaligas, they shared similar concerns and a desire for social progress.
So let's delve into the world of Parsi reform. What were its origins and objectives?
The Parsi reform movement was founded in 1851, with key figures like Ferdunji Nairoji and S.S. Bengali leading the charge. Initially, their focus was on defending the Parsi community from external pressures, especially the influence of Christian missionaries. But later, the movement shifted inward, towards internal reforms.
So it began defensively, protecting their identity, and then evolved into a movement for self-improvement.
Exactly. Ferdunji Nairoji, for instance, was a strong advocate for Zoroastrianism, using his writings and the journal Fami Famished to promote its teachings. S.S. Bengali contributed through his journals Jagat Mitra and Jagat Premi.
It seems they were harnessing the power of the press, just like the Vokaliga Sangha, to spread their message and sway public opinion.
The written word was a potent tool for reformers across communities during this time. It allowed them to reach wider audiences, spark debates, and advocate for change.
What were the specific reforms that the Parsi reform movement aimed to implement?
Their overarching goal was to revitalize Parsi social conditions and restore the Zoroastrian religion to its original purity. This involved reforms to both religious rituals and social practices.
So a two-pronged approach, revitalizing their faith and tackling social issues within their community.
Precisely. They used the newspaper Rast Goftar, meaning truth teller, to spread their message of reform. They wanted to purify religious rituals and practices, bringing them closer to what they considered the original tenets of Zoroastrianism. They even redefined the Parsi creed.
That sounds like a significant undertaking, attempting to redefine the very essence of their religious beliefs.
It was certainly ambitious, but it shows their commitment to bringing about meaningful change. And their efforts went beyond the realm of religion.
What were some of the social reforms they championed?
One key focus was improving the status of women within the Parsi community. They advocated for abolishing purdah, the practice of secluding women from public life. They also wanted to raise the marriage age for girls, recognizing the harmful effects of early marriage.
It's encouraging to see that even back then, there were voices advocating for women's rights and empowerment, not just within the Vokkaliga and Dravidian movements, but also within the Parsi community.
It highlights the growing awareness of gender inequality and the determination to challenge patriarchal norms across different segments of Indian society. And education played a crucial role in their vision for women's empowerment. They firmly believed that educating girls was essential for their progress and for the betterment of society as a whole.
So we've explored the Vokkaligara Sangha, the self-respect movement, and now the Parsi reform movement. Each had its own unique context, leaders, and objectives, but they were all striving toward a more just and equitable society.
What's fascinating is how these movements, despite their differences, shared certain common threads.
That's a great point. So let's connect the dots. What were some of these shared goals or tactics that these movements employed?
Exactly. They all challenged the existing social hierarchy in one way or another. The Vokaliga Sangha fought against caste-based discrimination. The self-respect movement aimed to dismantle the caste system altogether, and the Parsi reform movement sought to reform practices within their community that they considered unjust or outdated.
So a shared theme of questioning established norms and pushing for greater equality.
Exactly. And they also all understood the power of education as a tool for social change. The Vokaliga Sangha established schools and hostels, Periyar championed education for all, and the Parsi reformers saw education as crucial for women's empowerment.
It's remarkable how education was consistently seen as a key to unlocking progress and breaking down barriers.
They also all utilized the power of the press to spread their message and mobilize support. The Vokaliga Sangha had its newspaper Justice, the Parsi reformers had Rast Goftar, and Periyar's writings and speeches were widely circulated.
It's like they understood that controlling the narrative and shaping public opinion was vital. What about their impact? Did they face any opposition or setbacks?
Of course, no social movement achieves its goals without facing resistance. These movements encountered opposition from those who benefited from the existing social order and resisted change. They were often labeled as divisive or disruptive.
But despite these challenges, they undoubtedly left an indelible mark on Indian society.
Their legacy is undeniable. They raised awareness about social injustices, empowered marginalized communities, and laid the groundwork for future generations to continue the fight for equality.
And that brings us to a critical question. What was their impact on the social and political life of India at the time?
Well, their impact was multifaceted. They contributed to a shift in the political landscape, with parties like the Justice Party and later the DMK gaining prominence by championing the rights of lower castes. They also played a role in shaping social reform policies, pushing for greater representation and opportunities for marginalized groups.
So they weren't just protesting. They were actively engaging in the political process to bring about tangible change.
Precisely. And their efforts also profoundly impacted social attitudes. They challenged traditional notions of caste and gender, contributing to a growing awareness of equality and human rights.
It's clear that these movements, while rooted in specific communities and contexts, had ripple effects that extended far beyond their immediate spheres of influence.
And their legacy continues to inspire social justice movements even today.
Let's shift gears and focus on those successes. What were some of the key achievements of the Vokaliga Sangha?
Well, they successfully advocated for greater representation of non-Brahmins in government jobs and educational institutions, and they played a crucial role in the formation of the Justice Party, which went on to influence policy in the Madras presidency.
They were able to turn their social activism into political power.
And their emphasis on education had a lasting impact. The institutions they established provided opportunities for generations of Vokkaligas, helping them break free from the cycle of poverty and discrimination.
It's a testament to their vision and commitment that those institutions still thrive today. What about the self-respect movement? What were some of their notable achievements?
They successfully challenged the very legitimacy of the caste system, sparking a debate that continues to this day in India. They raised awareness about the plight of lower castes and empowered them to demand their rights.
They fundamentally shifted the conversation on caste, making it impossible to ignore the injustices it perpetuated.
And their influence on politics in Tamil Nadu was immense. The DMK, born from the Dravidian movement, became a major political force championing social justice and regional autonomy.
So they didn't just challenge social norms, they reshaped the political landscape.
And let's not forget their contribution to women's rights. Periyar was a staunch advocate for gender equality, and the self-respect movement was instrumental in challenging patriarchal norms and promoting women's education and empowerment.
It's inspiring how they connected the fight for caste equality with the fight for gender equality, recognizing that these struggles are interconnected. Now, what about the Parsi reform movement? What were some of their key successes?
They successfully reformed many religious practices within the Parsi community, aligning them more closely with what they believed to be the original tenets of Zoroastrianism. And they made significant strides in improving the status of women within their community.
So they brought about real change, both within their faith and their social structures.
They also raised the profile of the Parsi community in India, advocating for their interests and contributing to the national dialogue on social reform.
It's clear that these movements, despite their different contexts and obstacles, achieved significant successes in their own ways.
And while they may not have accomplished everything they set out to do, their legacy continues to inspire movements for social justice today.
Yeah, it's amazing how these movements, while fighting for specific communities, also tapped into this much broader wave of social change happening across India. There was this incredible surge of activism, a real hunger for a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. And that's what makes this era so pivotal. You can't just look at the Vokkaligara Sangha in isolation.
Right.
Their story is intertwined with the self-respect movement, the Parsi reformers, even with those larger movements for nationalism and against colonial rule.
It's like all these different threads are woven together, creating this complex tapestry of social and political change.
Yeah.
What do you think makes the Vokaliga Sangha stand out in this tapestry?
Well, their story is one of resilience and adaptation. Remember, they went from, being rulers to primarily an agricultural community.
Yeah.
But they never lost that sense of identity, that desire to shape their own destiny. The Sangha became their vehicle to regain a voice and influence.
And they weren't just reacting to oppression.
No.
They were actively building institutions, promoting education, laying the groundwork for future generations to succeed.
Precisely, that focus on education and self-empowerment.
Yeah.
That is so important. It's a theme you see echoed in a lot of these reform movements.
Mm-hmm.
They understood that real lasting change comes from within, from equipping people with the knowledge and the skills to claim their rightful place in society.
So for those of you preparing for the UPSC, especially for GS1 Modern History, what's the key takeaway here?
Yeah.
What's the one thing you should understand about the Vokaliga Sangha?
Think of them as this microcosm of the larger social transformations sweeping across India during this time period. They represent a community grappling with the challenges of modernity, of colonialism, of finding their place in this rapidly changing world.
And they demonstrate that social movements aren't just about protests and slogans. They're about building institutions, shaping policies, and ultimately transforming society from the ground up.
Exactly.
Now, a final thought for you all to consider as you continue your studies. We've talked a lot about the Vokaliga Sangha's impact on their own community, but what about their influence on the larger social and political landscape of Karnataka and beyond? What were the unintended consequences, the ripple effects that went beyond their initial goals? That's something worth exploring further, to see how this one community's struggle for justice helps shape the India we know today.
It's a great point to leave our listeners on. It reminds us that history is interconnected and that studying movements like the Vokkaligara Sangha can give us a much deeper understanding of India's journey to becoming the nation it is today.
Absolutely. And for those of you hitting the books for the UPSC, remember, it's not just about memorizing facts and dates. It's about connecting the dots, analyzing different perspectives, and really understanding the complexities of these social movements. So to all our listeners, whether you're a student, a history enthusiast, or simply curious about India's past, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains engaged.
If you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a captivating historical topic.
Until next time, happy learning.